Welcome to a Legendarium special about the Battle of the Solent in 1545, when King Henry VIII defeated a French invasion. In this episode, we will talk about how Henry's Reformation helped to make England a pariah state open to a counter-Reformation invasion. During the 1530s, King Henry VIII took a break from eating and womanizing to break away from the Catholic Church, and he declared himself the head of both the English Church and Kingdom. A unsurprisingly furious pope called for a crusade against the heretic king in England. Both France and the Holy Roman Empire joined the pope's cause. King Henry VIII responded with a Herculean effort, surveying every inch of English coastline from Milford to the Wash and beyond. He intended to identify every possible haven for an invader and fortify it. From a special map room deep in the bowels of Whitehall Palace, King Henry VIII commissioned a vast construction project to transform England into an island fortress. Engineers armed with cash and stone taken from the confiscated Catholic abbeys and monasteries began to put up fortifications according to distinctive plans of King Henry's own design. Each fortress included heavy artillery pieces to provide any French or imperial ships found near the English coast with an unfriendly welcome. To patrol his new moat, King Henry VIII hired 7,000 sailors as the Royal Navy expanded from 5 ships to 40, as great an expansion as what we saw in Henry's waistline. Many poor young men signed up for the promise of free board and 3 meals a day. Their captains kept the promise about food, for they wanted their sailors strong and working. They worked indeed, toiling in grueling shifts of 4 hours on and 4 hours off that kept them from getting a full night's sleep, which ensured they would be too tired to organize a mutiny. While on shift, King Henry's sailors cleaned the deck, worked the sails, and caulked the planking with tar and pitch to keep it waterproof. They worked in blazing heat or freezing cold, and during slashing storms, their clothes grew so heavy with water that they felt as if they wore plate armor as they wrestled the lines. In their 4 hours off, they slept in the storage compartments or curled up under one of the big guns. If they had the time and the strength, they made merry by playing drums, fiddles, and pipes. Some sailors even brought pet dogs on board their ships, and for a latrine they used 2 channels on the upper deck which fed their urine and feces into protruding beams that sprayed the waste into the ocean. In 1544, King Henry VIII allied with Emperor Charles V and declared war on France, hoping to put his Protestant fleet to use. And after Emperor Charles V took the city of Boulogne, he betrayed King Henry by negotiating peace with King Francois of France. And on January 3rd, 1545, King Francois announced his intention to invade England. He stated that he wished to liberate the English from the Protestant tyranny that King Henry VIII has imposed upon them. King Francois chose Portsmouth, Henry's main naval base, as his target. In May 1545, the French assembled a huge fleet in the estuary of the River Seine under Admiral Claude de Annabault. On July 3rd, the French expedition set sail for England, and King Henry VIII and his Privy Council traveled to Portsmouth. On July 18th, the French fleet entered the Solent unopposed with 150 warships, 25 war galleys, and over 30 30,000 troops, making it twice as large as the Spanish Armada, which sailed 40 years later, and 3 times larger than the fleet that Duke William used to conquer England in 1066. To oppose this vast fleet, the English had only 80 ships, including the flagships Mary Rose and the Great Harry. Vastly outnumbered, the English fleet sheltered in heavily fortified Portsmouth harbor. With King Henry watching from Southsea Castle, the French began their attack with 25 galleys, each equipped with a single huge cannon on the bow. They moved in on the English fleet, only to be fended off by English row barges. July 19th proved a relatively calm day, and the French continued their attack off Spithead, using their galleys against the less maneuverable English ships. During this stage of the battle, the French sank Henry's flagship, the Mary Rose. King Henry VIII first built what would become his flagship in 1511 to counter the growing Scottish and French fleets. It saw frequent action in every war of his reign, and it is thought that having fired a volley from one side of the ship, she turned when a sudden gust of wind made her heel over. Water began rushing in through the open gun ports, or perhaps a hole made by a French shell. Anything not secured on the deck began careening about and knocked men into the freezing ocean. She sank with astonishing speed, cracking lengthwise along her hull, and out of a crew of at least 400, fewer than 35 escaped with their lives. Propelled by the weight of cargo, the hull, and men trapped aboard, the Mary Rose rammed into the seabed with such force it plowed 9 feet into the sea floor. Late in the afternoon, the wind picked up again, and the English used this to their advantage to beat off the French galleys despite the terrible loss of the Mary Rose. Unable to get an advantage after 2 days fighting at sea, the French invaded the Isle of Wight. The island had a population of only 9,000, outnumbered over 3 to 1 by the French forces. But because of frequent French raids during the 100 Years' War, the islanders proved well prepared. Every man of military age underwent compulsory training, and the women even trained as archers. The French admiral ordered 3 attacks upon the 3 castles on the island: St. Helens, Bonchurch, and Sandown. The cannons at St. Helens Castle had been bombarding the French fleet since that morning, but the French nonetheless took the fortress, along with Bonchurch. Remaining English forces in the area ran away, while the French laid waste to the villages of Bembridge, Seaview, and Nettleston. The English commander on the Isle, Captain Robert Fisher, proved too fat to run, and is said to have offered £100 to anyone who could bring him a horse. Believed to have perished during the battle, Fisher's plea inspired William Shakespeare's play Richard III, when Richard cried, "A horse, my kingdom for a horse!" A third French attack came at Sandown Castle, then in the last stages of completion and the last English castle upon the Isle of Wight. While the French landed successfully around Sandown before they could dig in, local militias rushed to the beach and brought pike and shot to the French invaders. A fierce battle broke out on the beaches and cliffs around Sandown Castle. The French leaders suffered wounds and decided their ships would be more comfortable. The battle is commemorated by a plaque in Seaview that reads, "During the last invasion of this country, hundreds of French troops landed on the foreshore nearby. This armed invasion was bloodily defeated and repulsed by local militia 21st July, 1545. Only 3 days after the sinking of the Mary Rose, the French commanders decided to abandon the invasion because they were running out of food and munitions. On July 28th, the French fleet departed. Ironically, the sunken Mary Rose became the most enduring legacy of the battle. Raised from the Solent seabed in 1982, it is now on display at Portsmouth Historic Dockyard, and artifacts from the Mary Rose are displayed at the nearby Mary Rose Museum, a good name. And this makes it the most tangible legacy today of the battle where King Henry VIII defeated a French invasion of England. That wraps things up for this episode of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.